The story opens with a young boy announcing that he is a wizard while he and a girl participate in play fighting. She acts as a monster that eats wizards, so he raises his wooden branch and hits her on the head. She yells out and asks why he actually hit her, while he explains that monsters are meant to lose against wizards. An elderly man observes the children and remarks on how lively they are this morning. The boy recognizes the man as Rabbus. He then inquires about what is needed to become a wizard, while Rabbus clarifies that one cannot simply become one by wishing for it. He describes wizards as the peak of humanity who rule from the highest social ranks, adding that they are nobles and knights who inherited the ability to use magic from their ancestors. He informs the children that they unfortunately cannot become wizards, while a nearby villager asks the elder how he could say such a thing before asking if current rumors are true. Rabbus asks for clarification on what he is referring to, and the man mentions hearing news that a monster has appeared. He confirms that the report is indeed true. He notes that a man named Rop came across it at the entrance last night and describes a creature covered in pitch-black shadows that was a leopard the size of a house. He reassures the man not to worry because the village chief went to the city to request a wizard and believes he will bring one back to subjugate the beast. The girl's mother expresses her relief at this news. She asks her daughter if she heard that and warns her not to go into the forest for now. Rabbus cautions everyone to be careful since killing a monster is almost impossible without a wizard. The villager asks if all the residents have been informed, and when he says they have, he asks if a certain person has been told as well. Rabbus asks who he is talking about. The man explains that he is referring to the shepherd on Hisarul Hill. High up on the hill, we see a shepherd named Turan. He rests while looking up at the sky and thinks about how dull his life has become. He reflects on viewing the same scenery and the same day over and over again. He wonders if he will eventually forget how to speak. Rabbus arrives and calls him a pathetic brat. He remarks that the sun hasn't even set yet and he is already slacking off, while Turan tells him to move because he is blocking the sunlight. Rabbus yells that he lacks manners and asks if he is still holding onto a grudge from a past incident. Turan asks if he is talking about the time his mother died, and the old man tried to quietly turn the sheep into shared property. Rabbus simply clears his throat in response. Turan says that if that is what he means, then yes, declaring that he is not generous enough to share his mother's inheritance and stating they are not close enough for pleasantries before telling him to leave. Rabbus shouts in frustration at the young man. Turan glares back and asks what he wants. He informs him that a monster has appeared, causing the shepherd to ask about it. Rabbus explains that it is a leopard the size of a house that Rop found. Turan admits that the situation is a serious problem, while Rabbus notices that he is not even scared despite being the most likely target. He tells him to be careful since the village chief went to request a wizard. He claims he only came because he was worried about him, but Turan thinks the old man is not being very honest. He suggests the man was actually worried about the sheep and not him, as Rabbus prepares to shout again. Turan tells him to get lost if he's done talking because his breath smells like rot. The old man walks away into the distance. Turan reflects on how monsters are beasts that wield mysterious power and magic. He considers that if humans have wizards, then beasts have monsters. He is pleased that a wizard is coming because it means he can finally see one in person. However, he wonders if a wizard summoned by a rural village chief will even be anything special. Still, he wants to see just how strong they truly are. Suddenly, his nose catches a whiff of something. Turan realizes the smell is coming from blood. He heads down into the forest and follows the scent. He says he is sure the source is in this direction. He focuses harder on the scent and walks in that direction, but suddenly he stops. He looks down and sees Rabbus torn into literal pieces on the ground. He thinks about how the man told him to be careful, yet went in first anyway, reflecting that he did not expect the blood smell to belong to Rabbus. He notes that this is not a wound an ordinary wild animal could make. He is sure that it has to be the monster. He hears something approaching as a massive paw lands on the ground and a large monster appears. Turan looks back while the monster creeps closer and he stares directly at it, realizing that the reports were true and a monster really exists. Back in the village, the boy playing wizard asks his father how strong a monster is, and if it is true that adults cannot beat it. His father says they are insanely powerful, explaining that if ordinary adults rush it, they won't even be able to collect their bones. The child asks what will happen to their village if they cannot beat it. He tells the boy not to worry because the village chief will bring a wizard to subjugate the beast. The boy asks if the wizard will lose to the monster. His father says that of course they won't lose, describing them as great beings born with the power of magic who will kill the monster with a single word. As the beast lunges at Turan, he looks at it and commands it to die. The command causes the monster to backpedal and create distance. It snarls at him as he releases an aura. He wonders if his power is not working. The monster leaps again and he tells it to stop. The creature pulls back once again. He reflects that he knew killing it would not work but wonders why it cannot even be stopped. The monster attacks but Turan dodges the strike. The beast turns and sees him off to the side. Turan decides on a plan and reaches into his coat. He pulls out a rock and says that a shepherd should do what a shepherd does. The beast prepares another strike. He tells the stone to harden and places it in his sling, while his eyes glow gold as he tells the stone to become faster and swings the sling. He takes a step forward and tells the stone to pierce through. The stone flies with a speed that seems to break the sound barrier. The rock flies toward the beast at full speed, and it is so fast that the monster can only dodge it slightly. The stone grazes the beast while cutting its ear and flying into the air. The beast dashes towards him with its mouth open and ready for a final attack. Turan says that it is actually aiming for the head. The rock suddenly stops in the air. It twirls and smashes into the back of the monster's skull, blowing it off. He stands over the corpse and reflects that this is his first time using the move on a monster. He wonders if he should toss the carcass into some valley. He grumbles that those village bastards really put him to work. Turan is a wizard. He realized his special abilities 8 years ago while he was only 10, at which time the young boy made logs fly through the air. Excitedly telling his mother to watch the logs flying, the child called out to her and announced his ability to create fire and wind. But his mother screamed for him to stop, and he reflects that it was the first and last time she ever got angry. Asking what was wrong, he was told to come and have a chat with her. She then asked if he wanted to live with her for a long time. Turan answered that he did. She made him promise to never use this power from now on, insisting that he must never use it in front of other people. She asked if he remembered the story about the noble and the knight. Confirming his memory, he listened as she explained that magic users are called wizards regardless of their status. She noted that nobles and knights are fundamentally different. Nobles are descendants of divine beings called the Freyans who came to save humanity, while knights are descendants of nobles mixed with humans. The boy confirmed his understanding. She clarified that this is why they differentiate between ranks even among wizards. Explaining that he inherited power from his knight father, she warned of evil nobles who treat knights like slaves. She told him to remember that nobody can know he is a wizard. 8 years have passed since that day. Turan has continued to uphold that promise to his mother. He declares that the promise will not be broken. He has no desire to reveal himself as a wizard or to descend the mountain. Suddenly, someone pounds on his door and yells for him to come out. Turan opens the door and goes out to meet them. He yawns and asks if they are claiming that he killed Rabbis. The villagers grab him by the collar and shout that he is shameless. They accuse him of hurting Rabbis and throwing him out to be eaten by monsters. He silently considers why they want to frame him. He notes that the oldest man in the village died alone instead of the young men who were too scared to fight. He realizes they think this is the best way to shift the blame from themselves to him. A villager tries to punch him, but Turan dodges and thinks that magic is convenient. Headbutting the man, he reflects that a strong wish happens at the cost of mana, and as another villager charges, he whispers for him to fall over. As the man falls to the ground, Turan notes that he does not need to start a fire. He just uses his power a little bit so that it is not obvious, just enough so that they do not die. He declares that he will dominate them. The fight continues as everyone charges at him, but after some time, all of the men are defeated and lying on the ground. For 8 years, Turan has hidden the fact that he is a wizard. He tells the men they should have used that strength for the funeral of Rabbis. Asking the nearby women if they are here to fight too, they reply that they only came to see him. He tells them to take those idiots down with them. Inside his home, he reflects that it is going to be chaos in the town again. He suspects they will use this as an excuse to rip him off when he goes to trade. He decides he can simply beat them up until he gets a fair deal. He thinks he gave them a proper whooping and they should not be back. Loud knocking begins again and he calls them insane. He throws open the door and asks who it is. He finds a tall man standing there. The man apologizes and says he thought he could ask for a favor in his travels, wondering if he has disturbed him. Turan wonders if he is a traveler. He apologizes and notes that a few uninvited guests just came by moments ago. Reflecting that his mother taught him manners, he wonders if that was proper, feeling awkward since he never talked nicely to people in this town. He observes a traveler with a sword in this sleepy old town. He tells the man that if he is looking for an inn, he should look elsewhere, but the traveler's stomach rumbles loudly. Turan sighs and tells him to come in. He prepares a meal and explains that he is not well off, so they do not have much. The man calls it a feast and notes that Turan must have never met someone from outside the town. Turan says that is right. He explains he was born and raised on this hill and has lived as a shepherd all this time. He notes that it is rare for this small town to get tourists. The man looks at him and finds it interesting. Commenting that for someone who grew up as a shepherd, he is well versed in manners, the man assumes his parents taught him well. Turan explains he learned from his mother, but she died a few years ago due to an illness. The man says she raised a proud son and is surely among the gods in a palace in the heavens. He thanks the boy once again, while Turan says he just lives the way his mother taught him. He asks what brings the man all the way out here to this country town, and the man explains he was asked a favor. Turan asks what kind of favor, so the traveler says they were looking for someone to take care of a monster puma. He declares that he is a wizard. Turan realizes he must be the wizard the village elder talked about, and the man says that is right. He asks if he can ask a question now, and Turan says sure. The man explains that he senses a monster in this area, but he does not see one. He finds it weird that Turan knows about the elder and the monster yet remains calm. Nodding that if the monster went for a human, it would be him, he asks if Turan is scared. He remarks that Turan seems awfully brave for a shepherd. He asks Turan who he really is. Turan remembers asking his mother why nobody can know he is a wizard. She explained it is because of the bad nobles. Comparing nobles to shepherds and knights to the dogs that nobles keep, she warned that they might treat him with love, but they can sell him off or sacrifice him. She told him she does not want that kind of life for him and asked if he wanted to keep living with her, to which he said yes. She told him to remember that nobody can know he is a wizard and warned that if other wizards find out, they will separate them. And they would turn him into their shepherd dog to be discarded at any moment. She told him that to avoid being found out as a wizard, he might eventually have to kill people. Turan thinks to himself that this must be what the situation has come to, while the older man asks if he is unable to respond to the inquiry. Kjorn stares at him for a moment before declaring that making such a face simply makes his joke feel awkward, and then he lets out a nervous laugh. Turan realizes it was only a joke and apologizes for lacking a sense of humor, while Kjorn insists he is the one who should apologize as he realizes he must have flustered the young man. He reflects that it is his first time hearing a wizard joke, which is why it caught him off guard, while the wanderer remarks that the reaction was so entertaining that he took the teasing a bit too far. He notes they haven't introduced themselves properly and expresses that it is nice to meet him. The old man reveals that his name is Kjorn and describes himself as a wanderer. Turan feels he should have introduced himself first and identifies as a shepherd. He states that he is 18 years old this year, to which Kjorn responds that he will be 75. Turan thinks Kjorn looks very good for his age, nodding he doesn't look old at all, while Kjorn explains that wizards age much more slowly than ordinary people and enjoy significantly longer lives. Turan asks how he ended up becoming a wanderer in the first place, and the man explains that after serving the Arabian family for 60 years, he finally left. He says that in his later years, he desired to roam from place to place without the need to settle down, and Turan calls the idea romantic as the two of them continue their harmless conversation. Turan reflects that sharing a conversation with a good person like this is something he never realized would be so enjoyable. They continue chatting until the sun begins to rise over the horizon. Kjorn realizes he didn't notice how much time he was spending as the light grows. He hands over a coin of Arabian silver, explaining that it is the purest of silver coins and worth more than the meal. Turan accepts the payment gratefully and wishes the man a smooth hunt, while Kjorn tells him to stop acting like they will never see each other again. He suggests he might come by a few more times to mooch off him before he eventually heads out. Later in the day, Turan walks out to the field when it is time for the sheep to graze. He commands the animals to gather, causing them to look at him and begin walking his way. He reflects on the fact that this was the first time he has ever met another wizard, and wonders how long it has been since he shared a conversation that felt so naturally comfortable. Turan notes the ease and humor that naturally seeped into the man's speech was more than any adult he's ever met. He considers him a truly good person, recalling that the man even returned with a wolf. Turan had always thought knights were just emotionless hunting dogs used by arrogant nobles. He wonders how he is supposed to tell the man that there are no more monsters on Hisaril Hill. Meanwhile, Kjorn walks through the forest and notes that the surroundings feel strange. He sees traces of a battle but notes that he cannot feel a monster's presence anywhere. He looks up and discovers the rock from the sling embedded deep in a tree, wondering if the monster was already hunted and who in the world could have done it. He considers if the village chief hired another wizard, but he feels relieved that someone made things safe. Suddenly, he senses something and turns around to see the monster walking toward him with its face ripped apart. It releases a blood-curdling howl as Kjorn identifies it as a monster's wraith. He wonders who would do something like this as the monster attacks him, and he leaps backward to avoid the strike. He knows that failing to absorb or disperse mana from a dead monster's corpse turns it into a wraith, and he notes that a wizard who hunts monsters would certainly know this fundamental fact. Leaping high into the air, he concludes that the person who killed the beast was definitely a wizard, and he asks why they would leave it to become a wraith or if they were simply ignorant of the outcome. He reasons that a novice knight who doesn't know the basics could never have killed a monster like this. He wonders if they had some other intention, but decides that either way, he must destroy it. Drawing back a bow made of sheer lightning, he launches a magical arrow forward. The magic simply disperses as soon as it comes into contact with the monster's body. Kjorn asks if the monster's mana is vastly stronger than his. Suddenly, the monster disappears into the ground. He wonders if it is trying to counter magic with magic and wonders where it has gone. The creature begins to appear from his own shadow and looms over him. It swings down and strikes his arm, causing blood to fly from the impact. Kjorn realizes this is not a level a mere knight can contend with in battle, nodding that one would need to be at least a lower-ranked noble to have any chance. The monster sends Kjorn backward as he reflects on running into a wraith of this caliber in a remote village, and he thinks that you really never know what life will throw at you. The beast continues to change its shape into an even more grotesque and horrific form. Kjorn believes this is as far as he goes but refuses to die obediently. He vows that even if he dies, he will take the monster down with him. He plans to concentrate all of his mana into his hand for a final effort and stab the creature directly the moment it lunges at him. As the monster and Kjorn charge at each other, something shining comes flying out of the jungle. It was a rock that hit the monster hard. Kjorn is baffled as he watches the creature fall on the ground. Turan approaches and asks if Kjorn is all right. Kjorn remarks that the shepherd's joke is quite startling too, but he is just surprised to see him. He realizes the boy is a wizard and asks why he didn't tell him the truth. Turan remains silent, so Kjorn decides to change the question and asks why he helped him, nodding that the boy could have just walked away and let him die. Turan says it is simple as he recalls the night Kjorn brought him a dead wolf. He remembers asking why the man went so far for a simple favor, while Kjorn wonders what he is talking about as Turan continues. He notes that with his skills, the man could earn a lot more money more comfortably. Kjorn calls the villagers pitiful people, and Turan asks in what way he means that. He describes them living on the frontier and trembling in fear without basic protection, while Turan argues that it isn't the man's fault, but Kjorn explains a wizard inherits the power of a god, so they should live with pride by protecting powerless commoners. He admits that not every wizard thinks this way as everyone has their own way of living. Turan smiles and tells him exactly that while the monster rises for another attack. Kjorn tells him to listen carefully because this is not a level they can handle. He warns it is a monster they cannot fight unless they are at least a noble, and he tells Turan to inform the village chief immediately and help everyone evacuate. He vows to hold the monster off here. Kjorn admits he talked big but doesn't know how long he can actually last, but Turan tells him that it is okay as Kjorn asks what he is saying. Turan tells him if the attack he just used managed to land, then everything is going to be okay, while Kjorn asks what he is talking about, wondering if that attack wasn't his full strength, and he thinks a young knight hiding in the mountains couldn't hunt a wraith that even nobles deal with. That's what Kjorn thought at first, but he realizes what he is seeing isn't just a small connection made in a rural village, nor is it the reckless bravado of a young knight who ran from nobles. The scene before his eyes could be the beginning of a wizard who will turn the world upside down. Turan declares that he was also curious about what his limits truly are. As Turan stands before the monster, he declares that he wants to test his limits. Kjorn announces he will not permit the boy to face this alone, warning that despite his remarkable talent, this opponent is too formidable for them not to join forces. As the monster attempts to strike him, a sudden attack sends it flying. Kjorn realizes he would only be an obstruction since he could not even react to that previous attack. He acknowledges that at this moment, he provides no assistance to his companion. He decides that his current role is to help the young shepherd's talent truly bloom. Meanwhile, Turan stands firm while launching a continuous series of attacks at the beast. However, he realizes the situation is not as favorable as it seems because his physical strikes are taking no effect. Kjorn shouts that it is impossible to kill a wraith with physical attacks alone. Turan asks how he is supposed to slay the creature then, and Kjorn instructs him to use fire or lightning. The boy's eyes begin to shine as fire appears, yet it simply bounces off the monster, leading him to observe that it is not working. Kjorn is shocked to see that Turan doesn't understand that establishing proper causality is a basic requirement for applying magic to another living being, wondering if the boy lacks fundamental common sense. He realizes now that Turan was the one who killed the original monster and allowed it to become a wraith. This leads him to the conclusion that Turan has never actually absorbed mana in his entire life. He tells Turan not to simply light a fire but to create the flame and then shoot it at the target, yet he remains stunned by just how strong the boy is already. Turan catches his balance and begins to imbue the fire into his hand. Kjorn reflects that while making fire isn't difficult for a wizard, controlling it requires separate training. Turan performs the task instantly, creating a powerful fire. He steps forward before hurling the flames at the monster. The flame explodes upon impact, causing the monster to scream as it burns alive. Kyorn urges him to keep his mind focused on the spell, explaining that he must keep pouring mana into it so the fire does not go out. He insists that everything about the wraith must be burned away as Turan continues to imbue his mana into the attack. His eyes shine like a rainbow as the flames grow more violent. Kyorn cannot believe they actually won and reflects on how absurdly strong that wraith was, noting that one would need at least noble class power to fight it, yet Turan took it down. Turan asks if the battle is finally over, while Kyorn remains in disbelief that a shepherd from the mountains achieved such a feat. Kyorn warns that if he does not want to encounter another wraith, he must absorb the mana first, and when Turan asks how to do that, he tells him to imagine draining something into himself. Turan agrees and places his hand on the remains. As he focuses, a green aura emanates from the monster and gathers into his palm. As he does this, all of the mana is absorbed and circulates throughout his entire body. As he starts to shiver, Kyorn mentions he will experience a certain kind of pleasure. He declares he cannot believe it even after seeing it with his own eyes and asks if this truly was his first time absorbing mana, and Turan confirms that it was. Kyorn explains that after an initial awakening, mana grows slowly with age, and the most effective way to grow is to kill monsters or wizards and absorb their mana. Since this was Turan's first time, his innate potential must be in a different league entirely. He concludes that this young man must belong to a noble house. Kyorn bows and apologizes for his previous rudeness, then asks which noble house Turan belongs to, but Turan tells him to wipe the blood off himself first. Back inside the house, Kyorn has his arm covered in bandages. He once again apologizes for his lack of manners toward the boy, feeling he can only apologize for making someone as esteemed as Turan perform such a task. Turan reminds him he has already stated he is not someone esteemed, explaining he is just a shepherd who does not even know who his father is. He glares and tells him to stop the formalities, while Kyorn agrees and tells Turan not to glare at him. But the man wonders why a powerful wizard would choose to be a shepherd, explaining he does not mean to belittle him, but the role simply does not seem to suit him. Turan reveals it was his mother's request which she held onto until the moment she died, and Kyorn asks for more explanation. And Turan describes how nobles live below the mountains. He explains that if his wizard identity is revealed, he will only be used by them and then thrown away, while Kyorn observes his mother was very wise. Turan is surprised since he expected him to call it overprotective parenting. Kyorn tells him his mother was not entirely wrong. He reflects that wizards have great power and that great power inevitably brings conflict, recalling a major war between noble houses just 20-some years ago. He explains it was a conflict between the House of Arabian, which he served, and the Great House of Zahar, noting that so many people died in that war. Out of roughly 3,000 Arabian knights at the time, more than 900 died. He reflects that nearly a third of them were lost. Sadly, he realizes everyone close to him was in that third, remembering his friend Denver, his teacher Hartman, and his beloved wife and son, who were all massacred by House Zahar. He concludes that his mother was right to an extent, as a knight's life can vanish more easily and meaninglessly than a commoner's. However, he points out that the one thing she was wrong about was Turan's aptitude. He admits it is embarrassing to say while in his current state, but he is a knight with fairly good skill, yet Turan easily destroyed a monster wraith that he himself could not bring down. He tells the boy his potential is not merely that of a knight but is at minimum noble level, and even among them, he possesses at least upper-tier aptitude. Turan asks if his mother was lying when she said his father was a knight, while Kyorn explains that on rare occasions, a child worse than a knight is born among nobles, or a noble-class child is born among knights. In that sense, he suggests it would be better for Turan to leave this hill and enter the world. Turan asks why he should do that, and Kyorn explains that humanity desperately needs more strong and kind nobles and knights, because humans are still not the complete masters of the world. Long ago, other races pushed out by the gods were left watching for a chance to rise again. In the midst of this, nobles only continue to wage war against one another. He argues this is an age that desperately needs someone strong and kind like Turan. More than anything, he asks if Turan is truly satisfied living as a shepherd. Turan looks at him and asks what he could even gain by going below the mountain. Kyorn explains that it depends on his desires, whether it be wealth, fame, authority, family, or friendship, noting that any of that is hard to obtain here. He tells him to try imagining the possibilities where he could wander as a wanderer and destroy monsters, or become an explorer in the unknown, or be adopted into a house to walk the path of power. Turan admits that listening to him, he thinks the man is right. He notes it would be more interesting than herding sheep here. For the first time, he is seriously curious about the world outside. Kyorn worries he might be planting expectations for no reason, but promises to support every possibility Turan has. Then he asks about his bloodline ability, and Turan asks what he means. Kyorn apologizes and explains he keeps forgetting the boy knows little about magic. He explains a bloodline ability is a trait nobles inherit from their ancestor, the Freyans, and whether or not one has this ability is what separates nobles from knights. He asks if any spell felt unusually easy, or if he has some outstanding ability that does not require magic. Turan wonders if it is because he is strong, but Kyorn explains that simply having mana makes a wizard's physical abilities stronger. Turan mentions he has a good nose and is pretty good at throwing stones, while Kyorn says that if his sense of smell is exceptional, it can be considered a bloodline ability. Kyorn notes that being skilled with thrown weapons is a trait of House Arabian, though it is a fairly common one. He tells Turan to continue explaining. After some time, Kyorn declares that he thinks he knows which house his abilities are closest to. Turan asks for the house's name. Kyorn's expression changes as he tells him the name of a great house known as Pursuers or Hunters. He reveals it is House Zahar, the very one that fought the war against House Arabian. Turan is visibly surprised by this. As Turan hears the name House Zahar, he becomes visibly worried. He looks at Kyorn with a sad expression since he shares a bloodline with the man's enemies. He considers the idea of apologizing, but notes that these relatives are practically strangers he has never encountered. Kyorn tells him not to maintain such a worried expression, noting that Turan did not participate in that war, and declaring that it is a situation for adults. He says that the fighting will never cease if they attempt to wash blood with blood. Turan asks if he possesses any regrets, causing Kyorn to inquire what he is referring to. The shepherd explains he is talking about the suggestion to descend the hill. Kyorn tells him that pursuing power after leaving the mountain will inevitably lead him to join House Zahar, noting that the young man has outstanding abilities, but declaring that he trusts his character. Turan asks what he means by that, so the man explains he is referring to the goodness within him, pointing out that he saved him while revealing an identity he has hidden for his entire life, and considering the idea that if someone like him joined House Zahar and achieved a high position, perhaps it could stop such a terrible war from occurring again. Kyorn says there is no need to think about the matter too seriously. He reflects that a decision regarding joining the family has not been made yet. Turan announces that his thoughts are now clear, and he wants to try descending the mountain. Kyorn tells him he has thought well, but the boy declares he does not want to depart immediately. He tells Kyorn that he will head down once the man's injury has healed, while Kyorn calls him kind, nodding he is only slightly scratched and reflecting that the boy is truly a good person. Later inside the house, Kyorn explains that mana is absolutely required to use magic, stating that this is why mana is commonly referred to as the key to omnipotence. Turan asks about the term, so Kyorn clarifies it is not a truly omnipotent power despite the name, and that using magic requires mana that matches it. The boy asks what the standard for matching mana is, so Kyorn declares he will explain that immediately. He says the difficulty of magic is largely determined by 3 factors, listing them as bloodline, affinity, and causality. He explains that bloodline is determined by the specific lineage one is born into, which applies to most nobles who are not knights. He considers that it would be difficult for the boy to heal wounds using magic, asking if he is wrong about that, but Turan declares that he is not. Kyorn continues that for members of the Ravista bloodline from the south, it is something they can achieve even without training since the power originates from the bloodline. Turan asks about the second factor, affinity, which Kyorn says can be thought of as familiarity. He explains it is the concept that a mage can more easily perform tasks they prefer or are used to, while Turan reflects that it is like how he created a fireball as if he were throwing a rock. Kyorn confirms that he is correct and considers that simply making flames would not have achieved the same speed or firepower. He notes the last factor, causality, is the most important, though he reflects he does not fully understand it. He asks what would occur if Turan tried to kill him directly by using mana, so Turan says some light would probably shine from his head and nothing more would happen. Kyorn says that is exactly the phenomenon occurring from a lack of causality. He explains it applies when there is no appropriate cause for a desired outcome, or when what needs to be achieved is excessively difficult. Turan reflects that he thinks he understands a bit of what causality is. He notes that to kill Kyorn, instead of spending mana wishing for death, he would need to provide a cause of death like creating and shooting flames, which is more natural than directly lighting one. Kyorn tells him exactly that while reflecting Turan could have been a scholar instead of a mage. Turan says that he can control ordinary animals as he wishes and asks why magical beasts would need something like that, so Kyorn tells him it is because of their mana. They continue talking while a sheep eavesdrops. Turan reflects that magic is certainly not easy, while Kjorn tells him an excellent mage knows not just how to use mana, but also the principles and situations behind it. The shepherd wonders if the House Zahar bloodline also possesses special magic, so Kjorn tells him they are skilled in stealth and tracking and suggests he try it once. Turan agrees to the suggestion. He closes his eyes and thinks how he does not want to be seen by others, wishing that neither sound nor smell could be detected. He starts to fade away and asks if it worked. Kjorn stands there speechless, seeing nothing in front of him. He tells him he succeeded because he can no longer see him. The man feels a little sad as he looks at the now empty room. Turan slowly reappears, and Kjorn reflects it has been a while since he has seen that ability, nodding it is still a frightening power. He notes that during the war, the Arabian knights feared that ability the most, while Turan reflects that this seems like an unfairly powerful ability. Kjorn tells him it is not invincible and declares he will teach him magic training methods. Turan says the man is being too friendly and teaching too much to a mage from an enemy family. Kjorn reminds him he saved his life and treated him, declaring again that he trusts his character. Later, an ugly bald man asks if Turan is truly selling the sheep and leaving. The bald man asks who will perform the shepherding from now on, and how he can decide such a thing without consulting them. Turan tells them they should figure out how to find a shepherd themselves, declaring it does not matter to them what he does with his belongings. He hopes they buy the sheep at a fair price or he will release them and leave. He says they are free to capture them but notes they will probably have a hard time. The chief reflects that this bastard is someone who keeps his word and that nothing good will come from irritating him. He says he understands and tells him to do whatever he wants while handing over a bag of money. As Turan and Kjorn start to leave, Turan reflects that the villagers still owe Kjorn compensation for everything and considers going to collect it. Kjorn tells him he does not intend to receive it because Turan was the one who caught the beast. Turan notes that is true and reflects they have reached a crossroads where they must part ways. Kjorn tells him he is sorry for refusing the offer to travel together as he is more comfortable alone. The boy declares he understands and thanks him for everything. Kjorn tells him to take care, and Turan declares he hopes they meet again with smiling faces. He watches the knight's retreating figure for a long time. Only later does he realize why he did not want the man to speak formally. He reflects that although he never lacked affection from his mother, he had been secretly yearning for a father figure. He realizes he wanted someone who could be a role model for what kind of man he should become. The journey continues as Turan travels deep into the desert and past a canyon. As he walks and looks up to try to look farther, he spots people off in the distance. He wonders if they are traveling merchants going from village to village. He reflects this is good since he can ask for directions. Turan reaches near them. A man asks who he is to block their path, so Turan explains he is traveling alone and asks for the location of the nearest city. They tell him he will reach a city called Mure if he follows the road they came from. Turan thanks them for the information and starts to leave, but one of the men tells him to wait. He asks if the boy is really going to leave after receiving information, while Turan asks what he is talking about and wonders what he wants. The man tells him he should give something in return if he receives something. They take out their blades and tell him to take off his bag. Turan asks if they are bandits and the man asks what he will do if they are. The man who gave the directions declares this is just recklessness, nodding this is a wasteland where no one would find it strange if someone died. He points his sword at Turan and tells him to take off his bag and cloak while they are being nice, because killing and stripping him would be unnecessarily bloody. Turan understands and notes they are bandits who kill people. He remembers his training with Kjorn, practicing magic with him and remembering everything the man told him. Recalling Kjorn, Turan declares he will use them for practice. The group begins to laugh at him, declaring that he is talking like some kind of wizard. Turan moves his hand forward, sending the men flying through the air with a gust of wind. He notes that instead of generating wind from thin air, shaping it with his hand, and amplifying it uses much less mana. He didn't realize he could whip up wind this strong with such a small amount of mana, and the men are left completely confused by the attack. He then begins to pull water from his water pouch, forming it into a crystal. He creates multiple crystals now, and the bandits realize they have made a mistake. One of the men is impaled by crystals, which kills him instantly. Turan thinks that this spell is supposed to be useful near a lot of water, but considers that simply throwing stones feels faster and stronger than this so far. The bandits apologize and say they didn't know he was a wizard while begging for forgiveness. The leader is distracting him while the rest of the group creeps up from behind. Turan lifts his foot and stomps down, causing a sand pillar to spawn under the men, and the pillars impale all of them as the leader stands there speechless. He stares at the corpses of his men and declares that this is impossible. Turan says he has one thing to ask, and the man declares he will answer anything. He asks why they attacked him without a plan, noting that a traveler walking alone could easily be a wizard. The leader explains it was because Turan bowed his head. He says that even when they spoke rudely, the boy bowed and greeted them, so they assumed he was ordinary. Turan thanks him and declares that the man taught him something useful. The bandit smiles and asks if he is really going to spare him. Water begins to gather above the man's head, as a flashback shows Kjorn telling him that he is going to meet many people, and there is something he must absolutely know. He says he must never show mercy to scum like bandits, describing them as the kind who do not hesitate to harm others for a profit. He notes the reason he is saying this so firmly is because he understands the boy's nature, and Turan declares that he understands the reasoning. A life spared out of pity could end up harming 10 good people, so he kills the man and reflects that he has stalled for long enough. The road the bandits drag their cart along left clear wheel tracks cutting across the sand for him to follow. As he follows the trail, one thought remains burned sharply into his mind. He killed people. He feels guilt but realizes he couldn't just let them go. Kjorn's warning comes back to remind him of those who rob and kill without hesitation, and such people would target others again at any moment. Like tracks in the desert slowly fatting as weeds grow over them, Turan's chaotic heart gradually settled as he recalled the teachings of Kjorn. And then, he arrived in a new world. He stands above the small city of Mure, which is unlike the village where he spent his life. He thinks that the place is pretty, and as the streets are crowded with people, he notes it is his first time seeing so many together. Even the architecture is completely different from what he is used to. He feels as though he has truly come to a city. He walks toward a shopkeeper who welcomes him and asks what he can get for him. Turan says he is not a customer. He recalls Kjorn saying that if he reaches a city and needs a place to rest, he should look for an inn. The shopkeeper tells him that if he is not buying fruit, he should get lost. Turan wonders why the man is being so rude, and if it is an unspoken rule in cities that questions require buying fruit first. He points to a fruit and asks how much it costs, so the merchant tells him it is 2 ducat. Turan asks what exactly a ducat is, but the merchant notes he looks like an outsider who probably doesn't know what that is, adding that paying with other coins is fine too. Turan hands over a coin and asks where he can find the inn. The man points him toward the biggest inn in the city. When he arrives, an inn staff member named Lena welcomes him. She tells him that he is a handsome guest, and he asks how much a night costs, and she says it is 16 ducat. He declares that he will stay, but adds that he has one more question. He asks if there is a monster nearby with a bounty on its head, but Lena is surprised that he is asking about a monster. He thinks about needing to kill monsters to absorb their mana, and recalls Kjorn saying that hunting monsters would earn money as well. He asks why she is not answering his question. Lena declares that there is no such thing as free in this world. She eventually has him buy a drink and tells him to go to City Hall. He asks what that place is. She asks if he really doesn't know and declares he must be from the countryside. She explains that city halls are where various public affairs are handled, and the officials working there are employed by the city's lord. She adds it is probably closed since the sun is already down, but suggests going there tomorrow if he wants to find a monster bounty. She asks if he is a monster hunter as well, so Turan asks what a monster hunter is. She explains people claim that if an ordinary person hunts monsters, they become a wizard, and she asks if he is trying to become a wizard too. She declares that anyone who believes that kind of superstition is an idiot, but Turan asks if it is just a superstition. Suddenly someone puts his hand on Turan, and it was a monster hunter named Midden who declares it is a fact that killing monsters makes you a wizard, saying he saw it with his own eyes. Lena is surprised to see him alive, but Midden declares he is not dying until he becomes a wizard. Turan pats the man's hand, and Midden removes it from his shoulder while apologizing for the intrusion. Turan says he wants to hear more about what was just said, and Midden asks if he refers to the part about becoming a wizard by killing monsters. He explains that wizards get stronger when they hunt monsters, and by the same principle, an ordinary person can become a wizard. He notes the 4 of them are hunting monsters to try and become wizards. Turan asks if that means someone among them is already a wizard, but Midden says no and explains there is only the Lord's wizard and 3 others under him in this city. He notes the boy's gear is too shabby for hunting and asks if he has a weapon. Turan says he does and holds up a sling, while Midden notes that judging by how worn it is, he must have used it a lot. Turan says it is good for firing something the size of an egg quickly, but Midden says he could easily hunt rabbit or fox monsters with that. He notes they were wishing for one more shooter and asks if he has any interest in hunting with them. Turan smiles and says no but thanks them for the offer. At night in his room, he reflects that there is no reason he has to hunt together with them. He thinks about what a chaotic day it has been. He still can't believe he actually left the village, wondering what is going to happen from here on. He senses someone outside his room and asks who it is. He recalls Kjorn telling him that a city isn't automatically safe and he should never let his guard down. He goes near the door while imbuing his hand with mana just in case. He cracks the door open and asks Lena what she is doing there. She asks if he was asleep and says she thought the room might be cold, so she came to keep him warm. He asks what she means by that. And Lena smiles and begins to undress herself. She tells him that it's exactly what it sounds like. The boy is confused and asks what she means by exactly what it sounds like. She explains that for a small amount of money, she will do whatever he desires, but he asks what she will do if there is nothing he wants. And she tells him not to lie, claiming she can tell just by looking at his face. But Turan turns into the Buddha himself and Lena stares at him. He recalls Kjorn getting mad and saying that he must never fall for the honeypot. The man had warned he always has to be careful with women at inns and prostitutes in general, since most of them carry sexually transmitted diseases. He noted that while they have strong disease resistance, and it is no problem for them, if Turan is careless, he could pass it on when he is with another woman, advising that he shouldn't let desire trap him into doing something he will regret. Turan thinks that cities are not easy to live in either, and reflects on the fruit shop earlier and now Lena too. He considers how they put a price on even small bits of information and conversation, and concludes that cities really are pretty cold-hearted. He then overhears Midden and his men discussing something. They ask Midden why he was trying to bring that guy from earlier along, as one of the men noted that he didn't look like he would be much help. The other dude said that was right, and that he just sounded so cocky he would be perfect to use as bait. But Midden explains it is because Turan reminds him of himself when he was young. He figured that if the boy was at least next to him, he might as well survive a little longer, while the others tell him that he is way too good-hearted. Hearing this, Turan smiles, thinking maybe the city isn't completely cold after all. The next day, he heads to City Hall and a man asks if he can help him. Turan asks if he is an official and the man asks what else he would look like. The young shepherd tells him he came to hunt monsters, which confuses the man. He recalls Kjorn telling him previously that the world would not be kind to him. He thinks about it the other way around, nodding there's no reason it has to be kind, and he was advised that if he wants people to treat him kindly, the method is simple. He must reveal that he is a wizard and ordinary people will bow their heads. The official hands him a paper and says that he cannot take it with him. He instructs him to look and then hand it back. Turan asks if it is a crow monster and the man asks if it looks like a cat or something. He explains that it is unlikely, but if he kills a monster, he has to bring it to the city, nodding a wizard is needed to disperse the mana so it does not become a wraith. He warns that if he kills a monster and leaves it abandoned, the penalty under city law is execution. Turan knows this and understands what happens when a monster becomes a wraith, and he cannot repeat the same mistake. Turan then asks if knights don't hunt monsters, but the official says they are not people with time to spare. He explains a knight's job is to maintain public order in the city. He notes that hunting monsters outside the city is something for thugs like him to handle, and as Turan leaves, the official comments that another corpse is going to pile up outside the city. But later, he comes with a dead monster with a giant hole in its chest. Everybody is surprised, unable to believe what they are seeing. They ask him how he managed to bring it back so fast and if he killed it alone. Turan says that he did and asks if he can receive the reward for killing it. The official says they will give it to him and runs to get Turan's reward. He hands over a bag and tells him to go get some rest. The other officials talk about how incredible it is because even its wings are still intact, and they wonder if it is possible to bring back a blade crow in this condition. The official thinks about it and looks over, asking Turan why he is still here. Turan asks if there are any other monsters worth hunting. They ask if he is really planning to go hunt more. Later, Lena tells him that these are the most expensive items on their menu. She never dreamed that someone like him could defeat 30 monsters in just 3 days. She says he must have made a lot of money from the bounties, while Turan continues to eat like a baby. He responds that money isn't his only goal. More precisely, the goal is the monster's mana, and thanks to that, he has definitely gotten stronger. He notes that compared to when he met Kjorn, his mana has increased severalfold. However, he can feel a limit approaching, and with only weak monsters' mana, it is going to be hard to get any stronger. He then tells Lena that he has a question for her, and she asks what it is, and he asks if she took a bite of this, but she reminds him that he ate it all by himself. She notes that even though he is skinny, he can definitely eat, and the chef says he made it for the first time in a while and is happy he enjoyed it. Turan says it was delicious, and as he stands up to leave, one of Midden's men grabs him by the coat. He asks if he is really eating something so tasty by himself. They make fun of him, saying they have heard that he has made a lot of money and suggesting he should give some charity to his partners. Turan hits him in the face, and the man stumbles backward. Turan asks if he wanted some more charity. Another man gets pissed and swings at him, but Turan dodges and hits him in the face too, while one runs at him carrying a chair and swings, but Turan blocks it. Turan raises his hand and flicks the man in the forehead. Lena gets nervous and yells, telling them to stop fighting in the inn. Later, Midden apologizes and says he gave them a proper scolding. He promises this will never happen again and explains they have been tight on money lately. He says they just got jealous when they saw him and tells the other two to apologize. And they both say sorry. Turan asks if things are that hard for them and Midden says they have just been limited. He doesn't think they will be able to pay the room fee but notes that it is their problem. Turan then takes out a bag of money and tells him to take it. Midden asks why, and Turan explains this is repayment for the kindness he showed before, remembering him saying he was worried and tried to bring him along. Midden asks how he knew about that, while Turan says there is no such thing as free and he needs some information in return. Midden laughs and says that information is what he is best at, and he will tell Turan everything he knows. Later, outside the town, Turan looks at it and reflects this might be his last hunt in this city. He notes Midden gave him information about the next one, so it is about time he left for there. He reflects there was a lot more useful information than he expected and that Midden is a great person. He thinks Midden is not as seasoned as Kjorn, but that just makes him purer and kinder. He then senses something and recognizes the smell. He starts to run in that direction, knowing what is happening but hopping his hunch is wrong. As he heads into the jungle, he sees marks on a tree. He looks over and spots one of the men cut across the chest and bleeding out. Turan recognizes that he is from Midden's group. He then looks over and spots Midden's corpse and the coins that he gave him on the ground covered in blood. Turan just wonders what happened to him. Turan looks down at Midden and one of the men who is still barely alive as the man struggles to speak but manages to get the word rabbit out. Turan is confused and asks a rabbit. But the dying man is finally able to say it's a rabbit monster. Turan looks to the other side and sees the monster still eating another man. The monster also notices him and glares at Turan with its red glowing eyes. Turan was standing up when the monster charged at him with great speed, but he dodged the attack, and the monster hit the tree, destroying it instantly. Turan can't believe how fast it is, and he was almost hit by it. He twirls his sling and raises it up before firing it. As the rock soars through the air, it splits into three, and all of them move toward the monster, but the monster easily destroys all of them. Turan notes that this creature is used to defending against thrown weapon techniques. The beast readies itself and dashes toward him once more. It is surprised when Turan completely vanishes in front of it. The monster stops the attack as it can't see Turan, but he suddenly appears behind it with a dagger in his hand and stabs the rabbit monster in the neck. Turan retreats and starts turning invisible using magic. The monster tries to attack at that moment, but Turan had already become invisible, and the monster was only able to cut down a tree. The rabbit monster becomes mad and starts cutting every tree he can see. After some time, it comes to a stop as it becomes exhausted and screams loudly. As the monster loses more blood, it finally dies and falls on the ground, as Turan was able to successfully rage bait it to death. He then undoes his invisibility and approaches the monster's corpse. He stretches his hand out toward the beast and begins to absorb its mana. He notices that the amount of mana he is getting now is different, reflecting that it is more than the leopard monster he encountered the first time. The man who is still barely alive can't believe that Turan is a wizard. Turan confirms that he is, and the man asks why he is hiding his identity. But Turan asks if any of the four of them have belongings he can pass on to their families, and the guy begins crying, saying that he doesn't have a family as he looks at Midden full of regret. Turan remembers Midden telling him about a great city nearby called Orem, which has a place called a library. Turan asks what a library is, and Midden explains it has thousands of books. He then tells Turan that at the moment he said the word books, he looked fully interested, so Turan asks if he really did, and Midden explains that he heard not just anyone can enter the library. Turan asks how he is meant to get in then, and Midden tells him that apparently only wizards are allowed inside. Turan says he understands and that he has decided. Midden asks what he is talking about, and Turan declares he is going to that great city he mentioned. Now Turan stands over their graves after having buried them. He wishes them happiness there and walks away. Sometime later, Turan is standing in line. He is almost embarrassed that he was shocked by the small city of Mure. Now that he is standing before the great city Orem, he can tell how big of a city this is based on the scale alone. He did not think that there would be this many people trying to enter the city. He sees the guards and wonders if they are scanning for criminals. As expected of a great city, it has a more established system. The guards tell him to stop, and Turan asks what is wrong. They inform him that he cannot be allowed to enter because his clothes are absolutely filthy, telling him he should dust himself off at least. Later, he gets into the city and stands before a massive tower. He reflects that this must be the library that Midden talked about. He thinks it is overwhelming and must have been built with magic. He walks up to the entrance and says that he is trying to enter. The guards tell him that only wizards are allowed to enter. He tells them that he is a wizard, but one of the guards gets pissed, asking if the boy wants to die for impersonating a wizard. He declares there is no way a kid like him could be a wizard. But the guard tries to imbue his hand with mana as Turan recalls Kjorn's words, who had told him that wizards can recognize each other by sensing the other's mana and can tell whether someone is stronger than them. Turan decides to use this to his advantage and releases a massive amount of mana. The guard gets scared from sensing the power and falls onto the floor. He realizes that this is no ordinary wizard and is at least of noble class or higher. He screams his name and declares he is Kenya, a knight of House Voltas, and wonders which house Turan is from. Turan asks if he has to tell him his house to enter, and the man says no. However, to use the library, he needs permission from the Master of Voltas. And when Turan asks what that means, the guard says he will contact House Voltas for him. Later, Turan is sighing as he reflects he thought it would be a simple process. However, maids are now cleaning him inside of a bathhouse, and he wonders how this even happened. He tells them to stop and asks if there is a problem with him washing himself. They explain that if they failed to properly attend to an esteemed guest, they will be punished. He tells them to do what they want, and they thank him for that. Later, one of the maids says that he is amazing. She instantly realizes what she said and covers her mouth. He asks if there is something on his face. The maid says she just lost herself because of how handsome he is and begs for forgiveness. He tells her there is nothing to forgive, but the maids tell him to stop speaking so casually to them. Then someone else enters and says, "Wow, what's this?" It was a girl who says she can't believe he is the same guest who showed up looking like a beggar. She notes that after washing up and dressing, he looks like a prince, while the bodyguard with her says she shouldn't be saying that. Turan introduces himself to the girl, and she introduces herself as Azella. She asks what house he belongs to, but he says that for personal reasons it is difficult to say. She tells him that is a shame. She decides to play a prank on him for hiding who he is. She begins to release her mana, which spreads throughout the room, thinking that he needs to show her what his mana looks like. Turan feels the crushing weight of Azella's mana slamming into him with intense force. But after a moment, he also releases his own mana, their auras clashing with each other while the surroundings tremble under the pressure. A guard rushes in front of the maids, putting himself between them and the spreading pressure. After a few moments, Turan retracts his mana, and Azella stops as well, finishing her test with a surprised wow. She looks at her hands, which are now trembling, and laughs. She then looks at Turan and asks if he wants to marry her. He is completely stunned, his thoughts wiped clean for a moment. Azella notices his frozen face and teases him for reacting that way, assuring him that it was just a joke. But she looks at him one more time, urging him to think about her offer as the seat next to her is currently empty. After saying this, she and her bodyguards leave the room. Turan watches her leave for some time and then looks down to see that his own hands are also trembling. She has mana that is on par with his at the very least, leaving him to wonder if this level of strength is considered normal in this city. The scene shifts to a different room where the man Turan wanted to see is waiting. This is Rug Voltas, the Lord of Aurum, who welcomes Turan as a young noble and asks if he already knows his name. Turan introduces himself, and Rug repeats the name Turan before asking if he wants to use the library. He mentions that a lot of people come there after hearing strange rumors, so he wants to clarify in advance that there is no amazing ancient magic in the library, nor is there some secret method to increase mana. Turan states that he is fine with that, explaining that he never wanted anything of the sort. Rug studies him for a moment and then allows it, nodding that there is nothing inside that counts as confidential information related to his house anyway. Since it has gotten late, he suggests that Turan rest and come back tomorrow, asking if that is acceptable, to which Turan declares he won't forget this kindness. The next day at the entrance, the guards check Turan and confirm his entry pass, welcoming him as an esteemed guest into the Sky Library. Turan pushes the doors open and steps inside. He looks up and sees the library climbing upward in a spiral that looks like it never ends. He finally realizes what the library truly is. Then a voice comes from nearby, greeting him by name. He turns to find a young girl standing there, who introduces herself as the librarian and states that, by order of the Lord, she will explain the simple rules for using this place. Turan stares at her, surprised to see that a little kid is the librarian. She raises a finger and explains that the first rule is he must compensate them if he damages anything. The second rule is he cannot take any books out. And finally, she will be watching him the whole time he is using the library. Turan asks if she could stand a little farther away while he reads because he feels uncomfortable. He asks if, as a librarian, she has read the books there too. She says yes and tells him that if he needs something, finding it for him is what she does best. She asks what he wants to read, offering options like romance or history or even something erotic since he is young, which makes Turan just look at her in surprise. Turan declares he wants to learn basic common sense about the world, and this time it is the librarian who looks surprised. She reacts quickly, moving with surprising speed as she gathers a heavy stack of books and drops them in front of him. She notes that many of the books are hundreds of years old and won't suit his needs, but she guides him toward a section that might help a little. Turan thanks her and she tells him he is welcome. He picks up one of the books and reflects on what a book actually is. Then he opens it carefully and starts reading, his expression changing as he thinks about how amazing these books are. Turan repeats the same routine every day, reading in the library. He now comes to understand the world's geography and its different races, learning about the etiquette of wizards and how various items are manufactured and processed, even studying monsters and relics from the era of the Old Empire. With each piece of knowledge he accumulates, his world, something that was once nothing but an unknown space, grows clearer and more vivid to him. Later, Lord Rugvaltas notes that Turan has been making excellent use of the library, which Turan confirms is true. The Lord then states that, separate from treating him as a noble, allowing him to use the library was an act of goodwill, and he declares he would like to receive payment for that goodwill. Turan does not stall and asks the Lord to tell him what he needs. Rug explains that a monster has appeared north of Orem and has been attacking travelers, noting that 4 knights who went to subjugate it never returned because they were eaten. He adds that it seems a noble will have to step in personally, but his house can only mobilize 2 people at the moment. Turan agrees to help, thinking that protecting people is what a wizard ought to do. However, he feels something is off, knowing that wizards are usually the type who do not get involved in things like this. Rug adds that the Northern Road is an important trade route for Orem and has been blocked for 10 days, so they have to reopen it quickly. Turan realizes that 10 days ago was before he even arrived in Orem, figuring out that this is why the Lord let him use the library so readily. The scene shifts as a large group leaves the city. Azella remarks that her father really is something else to think he would mobilize a guest for a monster hunt, asking if they were truly that unreliable. She tells Turan that she is not blaming anyone, but says the Lord is making a huge fuss. The man beside her laughs and asks if calling the Lord fussy is a bit much, prompting Azella to tell him to drop it. That man stops for a moment and turns toward Turan to introduce himself as Marvin Valtas, saying he looks forward to working with him, and Turan returns the greeting. As they walk, Azella says they should finish this quickly and go back to rest. Marvin leans in and asks if Turan is interested in his big sister by any chance, to which Turan says no instantly. Marvin looks genuinely relieved. Suddenly, the guard at the front shouts for everyone to stop. Up ahead, they find a destroyed carriage on the road. As they inspect the wreckage, one guard asks if this was done by that creature. Another guard says it probably was, reasoning that since they forbade anyone from going north from their side, the travelers must have come from the south and gotten attacked by the monster. Turan stays quiet and studies a mark on a wooden board. He then states that the monster is a monkey. Azella repeats the word with doubt, so Turan tells them to look at a handprint and explains that the creature attacked the peddlers and went back into the forest. If they locate its trail, they should be able to find it. Azella says she can barely use tracking magic and asks Marvin if he can, but Marvin says he cannot either. Turan then steps forward, volunteering to try looking, and searches for something amidst the carriage parts. Azella asks if he is from a specific tracker bloodline, but Turan just picks up a small piece of cloth and simply says he uses this method a lot and is used to it. He closes his eyes, smells the cloth, and activates a search spell. He opens his eyes and a blue energy trail becomes visible to him. He points toward the forest and leads them that way. The trail stops at a river where Turan notes that it looks like the beast washed its body. Azella refuses to believe a mere beast did that on purpose to avoid being tracked, while Turan suggests it might have just washed because it wanted to. Suddenly, Turan sees those blue lines again and warns the group that the beast is behind them. A massive monkey monster with glowing red eyes emerges, roaring loudly. The monkey raises its hands, in which it is holding large stones. The knights see this and shout for everyone to dodge. The monster launches the stones, which are so large and fast that anyone hit by them is heavily injured. Turan barely escapes the attack, but he is more surprised by what he is seeing. Azella and Marvin do not dodge the attack but use the knights as shields, and because of that, those knights are heavily injured. After the attack stops, Azella simply throws away the knight she was holding as a shield. Turan finally understands that his mother was not wrong. Azella screams for everyone to attack. The remaining knights who can still fight run toward the monster, but the monster turns to run and the knights, seeing it flee, chase after it. Meanwhile, Turan puts a small rock into his sling. Azella and Marvin run after the monster, but it is too fast. Azella says that they are going to lose it, but as she speaks, she sees a small rock fly past her. It is so fast that she cannot even react. The rock flies past all of them and hits the monster, going straight through its body as it screams in pain. Azella and Marvin look back and see Turan walking calmly while spinning his sling. Turan looks up as the monster screams again. As the monkey monster screams and collapses on the ground, Azella quickly seizes the opportunity to finish the creature, extending her hand and using her magic as an immense torrent of fire erupts. This fire takes the form of a dragon and moves toward the monster, but the creature can only stare at the flames because it is heavily injured by Turan's attack and cannot move. As the fire hits, it creates a massive explosion, completely obliterating the monster. Turan watches the flames and realizes that he is witnessing the bloodline ability of House Volta's pyromaniacs. The knights can finally breathe in peace now that the threat is gone. Azella looks at Turan, admitting that she got chills for a second while his rock was flying toward them. Marvin asks if his sister got scared. Azella tells him to shut up and declares that he is the one who screamed like a little girl, to which Marvin asks in disbelief when he ever did such a thing. Meanwhile, the knights are busy checking the wounded. Several men have broken arms, but one veteran tells them to quit whining, pointing out that someone else had their whole arm blown off, asking if anyone has spare bandages, while another knight notes that a man's head will not stop bleeding, prompting someone to suggest trying to apply medicine to the wound. Turan looks over the scene and realizes this is a mess, remarking that they are lucky there were no casualties. It was a surprise attack by a monster, but he notes this was a fight where they could have avoided serious injuries altogether. He looks at Azella and Marvin, considering the fact that since their bodies get stronger based on their mana, these nobles should be several times tougher than the knights. Despite this, they did not hesitate to use people weaker than them as shields. Marvin notices Turan's stare and asks if something is wrong, but Turan tells him it is nothing. Azella calls Turan over, nodding that the most important part of the battle is to absorb the monster's mana, and she welcomes him to the absorption party, to which he agrees. The three gather around the monster's remains and raise their hands. As Turan begins the process, he reflects on how the books were right. Even if multiple people absorb mana at once, the degree of enhancement does not seem to be reduced. Azella stops absorbing mana, frustrated that she has already reached her maximum and complaining about her crappy growth limit, while Marvin reaches his limit soon after. But Turan continues the absorption process naturally, prompting Azella to finally understand why her father sent him along. He possesses incredible spell proficiency and a mana capacity that rivals her own. She is amazed to think he is a noble who hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. As the sun sets, the group returns to the capital. Marvin reflects that they would have never defeated the monster without Turan, crediting him for everything from his tracking ability to the hit that knocked the beast down. Turan asks him to stop, insisting it wasn't anything spectacular. He admits he regrets noticing the monster too late and allowing it to get the first strike, as he did not expect the creature to have a search ability. Marvin asks with surprise if it really had a search ability. Turan says yes, and explains that different abilities seem to awaken depending on the monster's external traits. He points out that the monkey had unusually big hands and big eyes, which were not part of its original form, meaning it probably awakened an ability to throw things with great force and the ability to see far away or through the forest. Marvin is impressed that Turan figured all of that out so quickly, and Turan explains that he looked through a monster encyclopedia at the library earlier. Marvin calls the library a stuffy place where no one goes. Azella mentions she went there once a long time ago out of curiosity, but found the books too difficult and left before reading even half a volume. Turan suggests that the next time she goes, she should ask the librarian if there are any easy books. Azella is confused and asks if there is even someone like that in the library. This reaction leaves Turan feeling confused. Turan heads back to the library and the librarian greets him by name as he enters, making him realize he was careless. He knows that no knight or commoner would ever call a noble by their first name, as everyone in the city uses the term esteemed one. He also thinks that the way she looks does not exactly scream librarian. He asks how she knows his name. The girl looks at him in surprise and then smiles, asking if he only noticed it now. She reveals she learned it from his permit and declares that as long as it is around this library, her gaze can reach anywhere. Turan asks how he should address her, and she says she doesn't really have a name, so he can call her whatever he wants. She suggests something cute like my love, but Turan decides he will just call her librarian. She calls him stiff and notes it is awkward for him to be polite after using her for days, calling her to do this and that, though Turan declares he never did that and tells her not to come so close because it is burdensome. He asks if she is a wizard from the old empire, but she says she was never a person to begin with, explaining she is a kind of spirit and asking if it suits her. She tells him that when a soul inhabits something living, it becomes a living spirit, but when it inhabits something neither alive nor dead, it is a regular spirit. In other words, the library itself is her. This human form is just for comfortable communication based on the user's preference, and she smiles, telling him that his preferences are kind of. Turan tells her not to make stuff up, but she insists she is like a reflection in water. Turan looks at her carefully and places his hand on her belly, but it goes right through it. She asks where he is touching and says it feels weird. Turan apologizes, and she complains about how annoying it is that she cannot directly exert power on intruders. She declares that if she could, she would have punished every last bastard who took books out of the library. Turan notes it seems House Voltas does not know she exists. She explains that until now, there was no one with the qualifications to perceive her. Her creator made it so only those whose type is complete beyond a certain level could see her, and she finds it romantic that only Turan can see her. Turan asks what she means by type, and she explains it is what wizards call a bloodline. He asks if she can tell him about his own bloodline, but she suggests asking his parents, to which Turan reveals he is an orphan. The spirit licks her lips and offers to check for him, saying she only needs his consent to examine his body. Turan asks what she means by that. The spirit laughs and makes a ghostly expression before suddenly sticking her hand into Turan's chest, which also goes right through his body, leaving him stunned. She laughs and notes that they are now connected. Turan tells her not to say weird things but realizes it doesn't hurt. She reveals that while there are a few small bits, the big chunks are the pursuer and hunter bloodlines, asking if that is a trait of House Zahar, and he says yes. However, she notes that there is one more bloodline and says that Turan is mixed. Turan asks what she means by mixed, and she explains he is the result of two people from different bloodlines, though she doesn't know what the other one is because it is still locked. She says a locked bloodline isn't that rare in bloodline combinations, and that it will open naturally as he grows stronger. Turan reflects on his mother, thinking she was far too polite and educated to be a commoner, making him wonder if she was a descendant of some noble with a bloodline so diluted it couldn't hold knight-level mana. He tells the spirit he understands and thanks her, prompting her to tell him to stay one more month if he is truly grateful. From then on, Turan does not read alone. He asks the spirit about the contents of the books and requests explanations, asking if there are really that many invisible substances in the world. The librarian shares knowledge from books that were plundered and vanished thousands of years ago, teaching him that if he makes water float and looks through it, he will be able to see it directly. Turan finds these lessons on the laws of nature to be a treasure beyond measure. He learns that diseases arise from microorganisms and that the decay of living things is caused by the feeding of germs. He also grasps basic principles like the refraction of light, the generation of heat through friction, and the process of how living things get injured and how they heal. Turan decides to experiment with decay. He touches an apple before him and it quickly turns rotten. The librarian asks how his progress is, and Turan calls it incredible. While existing magic can achieve this effect, understanding the scientific principle allows him to consume far less mana. He realizes that simply changing the way he perceives the world has raised his skill as a wizard. He asks if powerful houses are monopolizing knowledge like this, nodding that if every wizard knew it, they would lose their competitive edge. The librarian notes that people's level of knowledge keeps dropping over time and says she now understands why. Turan eventually declares it is time for him to leave. He says that the owner of this place has been openly giving him hints to go. The librarian's spirit begs him to take her with him and tries to hug him, but she passes right through his body and hits the floor. Turan asks if she can even leave the place, and she admits she cannot. She begs him to stay, promising to take good care of him, but Turan gently says he will pass. She huffs that he is never going to say he will stay. She encourages him to look around the land for the god's legacy, suggesting there might be spirits out there who know even more than she does. Turan promises to visit from time to time. She tells him to come if he wants to or not, though she is clearly sad to see him go. Turan smiles and says that there are still many books he has yet to read. He finally leaves the city, following a continental map he got from the library. House Zahar's base is in the Emerald Desert, east of Orem. He decides to head toward Zahar to find clues about his parents. As Turan walks, he notes that there is no need to rush. If the clues were going to disappear, they would have vanished sometime over the last 18 years, and if they are still there, arriving a little later will not make them vanish now. He continues to train, kill monsters, and absorb their mana. As he travels through the woods, he suddenly hears a horse neighing. He wonders what is happening and spots a majestic horse with a saddle. Turan realizes that the horse is not attacking the man lying on the ground, but is actually protecting him from attackers. One attacker calls it a demon and asks what kind of pet monster could be that strong. Turan watches closely, wondering if the horse is actually the one being targeted. Suddenly, Turan realizes who the attackers are. They are two dark elves, and one tells the other to try and create an opening somehow, to which the second elf replies that it is easier said than done. One dark elf uses magic as a purple energy spreads out, and monsters start to rise from the ground. Turan realizes this is the dark elf necromancy he read about in a book. He wonders if he should help but hesitates, thinking the man lying there might have been the one who attacked the dark elves first. His eyes widen in shock as he sees one of the dark elves eating a human arm. The first elf asks whose hand that is and tells the other to give her one too, but the second one tells her to eat her own, as she must have already taken some for herself. Turan realizes with disgust that they are cannibals. He activates his stealth magic and becomes invisible while the female dark elf remarks that the men she killed are too hairy. And as the male elf takes his final meal, he is killed by Turan's attack in an instant. The strike is so fast that the female elf cannot even react. The monsters summoned by the now dead elf vanish. Seeing this, the female elf panics and tells her monsters to gather and protect her, and the beasts immediately surround her. Turan attacks with a rock, but a monster blocks the projectile with its horn. The elf shouts, demanding to know who is there and ordering them to come out, as a buffalo monster charges in his direction and destroys the trees. The elf realizes her attacker is using stealth and declares they will see if he can still hide after this. As she summons a wolf monster, it releases a glowing orange aura that spreads through the area and detects Turan. Turan's magic fades away and he starts becoming visible. The elf also notices him and shouts that she has found the demon. She commands her monsters to kill him and they charge at him. Turan rubs his hands together and creates fire. He releases an explosion of flames at the monsters, which knocks out the wolf monster, but the buffalo remains unharmed. It rushes toward him, and Turan barely dodges the attack, falling to the ground. Turan realizes they are incredibly fast and thinks it is a good thing he took one of the elves out beforehand. Suddenly, Turan feels a sharp pain and looks down to see the wolf monster biting his leg. Turan kicks the beast away and stands up, but as he tries to look for the other monster, the buffalo runs toward him at full speed and sends him flying into a tree. Turan coughs up blood and falls to the ground as he's surrounded by the monsters and the elf. The dark elf laughs and says it serves him right, asking how he dared to kill Kel, and she declares she will make Turan beg to die. However, the horse suddenly strikes the dark elf in the head. The elf's head is crushed, and she screams as the horse continues to trample and kick her. The elf's beasts look back and start attacking the horse, saving the dark elf. The dark elf notes what a humiliation this is and vows to kill Turan, but Turan releases another attack, and this time it connects, blasting off the dark elf's head and killing her instantly. As her body falls to the ground, her summoned monsters also vanish. Turan is completely exhausted and collapses to the ground. He realizes that the fight took a lot out of him. The horse approaches and nuzzles Turan's head. Turan thanks the horse. Later that night, the unconscious man, a blonde-haired youth, wakes up by a campfire. He groans and then jumps up in surprise. He sees Turan sitting across the fire. Turan tells him he is finally awake. The boy asks who Turan is, and Turan explains that he saw him being attacked by dark elves and intervened to save him. The horse approaches the youth and the boy pets it, calling her Tilly. Turan remarks that Tilly is a good horse, nodding that not only did she understand she had to protect her master, but she even knew she needed to move him to a safer place. The boy thanks Turan for saving him and introduces himself as Aziz of House Berg, prompting Turan to give his own name in return. Turan asks if there was any particular reason Aziz came into conflict with the Dark Elves. Aziz explains there wasn't a specific reason. He was simply on a pilgrimage with his retainers when they were suddenly ambushed without provocation. Aziz begins to cry, saying he had heard these other races were savage but never imagined they would be this bad. He sobs for his fallen friends, explaining that the people he lost were very precious to him. Turan asks if they were his family, and Aziz replies that they were the knights and servants who came on the pilgrimage with him, and that they had practically raised him since he was little. Turan notes that Aziz seems like a good person. He asks if Aziz knows how many dark elves attacked because he killed 2 of them, and Aziz says that should be all of them. Turan then uses his search spell and senses the surrounding area. He confirms there are definitely no more dark elves nearby. Aziz asks Turan if he has any urgent business, and Turan says that he is also in the middle of a pilgrimage. Aziz is amazed that someone on a pilgrimage would have so much power, asking if Turan is the child of some great house and wondering why he is traveling alone. Turan replies that it is difficult for him to explain. He claims he is not that strong, saying he only managed to ambush 1 elf and barely fought off the other with the help of the red horse. Turan releases his mana, and Aziz is confused at first but also releases his own mana. They both check each other's power. Turan is shocked to realize the blonde man's amount of mana is incredible. If he hadn't absorbed the dark elf's mana, he would have even less than Aziz. Aziz thinks that, honestly, Turan's raw mana alone is at a level where he would not be overwhelmed by 2 necromancers. Deducing that Turan must be noble-born from a powerful bloodline, and that since he is on a pilgrimage, he probably hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. Aziz wonders why someone like that would be traveling alone. Aziz then asks Turan if, assuming he does not have a fixed destination, it would be all right to invite him to House Berg, promising to repay Turan for saving his life and asking him to safely escort him back to his house. Turan asks what Aziz means by repayment. Aziz gives a large grin and declares that those of Hausberg are enchanters and vassals of Arabian, the great house to the north, explaining that they belong to a bloodline that has crafted magic tools for generations. He tells Turan that he will make him the finest magic tool worthy of his skills. Sometime later, they move deep within the forest and bury Aziz's subordinates, who were killed by the dark elves. Aziz lets out a quiet sigh and observes that things finally seem to be coming to an end. His voice carries a hint of relief, yet he reflects on a heavier thought, admitting that he would like to send everyone back to their hometowns if he could, but adds that it will be difficult. He turns toward Turan and thanks him, to which Turan glances at him, slightly puzzled, and asks for what. Aziz hesitates before answering that it is because Turan did not mock him. He is a noble, yet he cried at the sacrifices of his subordinates, calling it pathetic. So Turan asks why he would think that is pathetic, and Aziz replies quietly that it is because that is what his father taught him. Those who fall in a righteous battle shall dwell in the heavenly palace with the gods, as he was taught that to grieve for them would be weak, and that a true noble must move forward, standing upon that sacrifice. But if not grieving over a family member's death is strength, then he does not think he could ever become truly strong. Turan listens in silence before a warm smile appears on his face, and he says that it is not a sign of weakness but kindness. Aziz is taken aback, then tries to lighten the mood by suggesting they speak more comfortably since they are going to be traveling together anyway, nodding that the age difference between them is not that great either, and Turan gives a small nod and agrees. Aziz smiles and raises his hand, announcing that he looks forward to working with him as a friend. Turan stands still for a moment, repeating the word friend to himself. He reaches out and holds his hand, telling Aziz that he looks forward to that as well. After some time, Aziz suggests they rest before continuing, so they stop nearby, where Turan points to a box on the ground and asks what it is. Aziz opens the box, which is full of food and wine, identifying it as a cold storage chest, and explaining that he kept several things in it from the last time they were in the city. Turan wonders if the inside is always cold, so Aziz confirms that it is and explains that thanks to it, most foods can be stored for about a week without issue, adding that cold food can be reheated before showing off other tools. He notes that if you press a button on one tool, water comes out, mentions another magic tool that creates shelter from gathered wood, and a third that sounds an alarm when someone approaches. Aziz suddenly looks excited and gestures to his own clothes, explaining that what he is wearing is a magic tool with a self-cleaning function. Turan observes that magic tools are not common items and declares that it is impressive. He says that just one set of clothing alone would be worth saving his life, but Aziz smiles and declares his life is worth way more than that, promising to reward him with far better things when they return to the main house. He adds that if the house won't allow it, he will make them himself. He then changes the subject, nodding that during the time they have traveled together, he has seen so many types of Turan's magic that he has lost count. Listing off animal control, freezing, levitation, liquid manipulation, enhancement, luminescence, restraint, instant death, terrain transformation, and lightning strikes. He asks Turan if he spent his whole life practicing magic, or if he has a bloodline ability that lets him master any magic he wants. Turan narrows his eyes and mentally notes that he just can. He reminds Aziz they agreed not to pry into families, so Aziz quickly laughs and says he was just kidding, claiming there is no way such a bloodline ability even exists. He then asks how old Turan is, nodding he does not look older than 30 but wondering if he has lived for 80 years, and Turan answers that he has about a month left until his birthday and turns 18 this year. Aziz is completely shocked. He reveals that he is turning 43 this year, but then chuckles and says a 25-year difference is not that important to them. Aziz crosses his arms and says he should have known Turan had that much magic power to take down 2 wraith sorcerers, adding he was not expecting there to be 2 geniuses like him in the world, leading Turan to ask, too. Aziz explains the other person is close and has an incredible bloodline, revealing that the other genius is his cousin. Turan asks if he can ask that person to make magic tools for him, but Aziz says no because she is from the main house. Turan wonders about the main house, as Aziz explains she is a princess of Arabian and might even become the head of a great house someday. After that, they start walking. He explains that unlike ordinary wizard houses, heads of great houses do not easily pass positions to their own children. Because in a great house, there are dozens of relatives in the same generation, and naturally at least one of them is usually stronger than the head's own child. Yet among the head's children, Mesa was born with the greatest talent. After awakening her magic power, Mesa mastered all manner of combat magic in just 10 years. Turan is surprised as Aziz adds that as a result, she received the full support of her house. And now at only 21, she is almost on the same level as the core members of the house. Turan thinks about how much power she has at that age and asks if the house performed a funeral. Aziz says that is right and explains that when their eldest granduncle passed, his magic power was devoured by Mesa, though they naturally received portions as well. Turan realizes it is clear there is a good reason the great houses maintain their supremacy. Aziz points ahead, nodding that it seems they are almost there. Turan looks up and Aziz explains that this is the Dakin Plains, the central territory of Arabian. They eventually arrive at Zavillan, the territory of House Berg. As they enter the mansion, a woman rushes out and asks Aziz what on earth is happening. Aziz shouts, "Mom," and embraces her, starting to cry. Turan watches, mentally nodding that Aziz is 43 and yet reacts this way. A man with a beard approaches and tells Aziz to mind his dignity and at least address her as mother. So Aziz apologizes and then introduces Turan as a new friend from the south who risked his life to save him, stating that without him, he wouldn't have made it back here alive. The mother says this pilgrimage route wasn't supposed to be that dangerous and asks what happened. So Aziz reveals they were attacked by dark elf wraith sorcerers. She is furious and calls them filthy wretches, declaring she will take an army and tear them to shreds. The man from before calls her the house head and tells her to compose herself because people are watching. He then asks Turan which house he belongs to, and Turan replies that he is afraid he cannot say. The man asks if he cannot, and Turan admits he does not really know, explaining he was born to a commoner mother and does not know who his father is. Aziz is shocked and asks why he never told him about that, but Turan replies it is not something worth boasting about. The head of Berg looks at Turan of the unknown house and declares that since he saved her child, she shall see that he is properly rewarded. She tells him it is difficult to offer him a room there, but says she will arrange for him to stay at the finest inn in the city, making Aziz frustrated as he asks his mother if they shouldn't host him at home. She explains that would normally be fine, but they have an important guest staying with them now. Regardless of the circumstances, it is difficult to bring in a stranger of unknown origin, and she hopes he understands. A voice suddenly speaks up, telling the aunt she does not need to worry about her, as surely the person who saved Aziz would not suddenly try to assassinate her. A woman dressed in black appears. Aziz realizes it is Mesa and asks what she is doing here all of a sudden. Turan observes the Princess of Arabian, thinking she looks more like a corpse in her current state. Mesa explains that she is there to hide because she was nearly assassinated by Zahor's vermin. Aziz is shocked that an assassination attempt happened at the main house. Given how fortified that place is, he asks if there could be an insider. Mesa replies that there is probably an insider because the main house does not just have one or two people with questionable loyalties. She declares she is tired and retires first, saying good evening to everyone. After that, Aziz's mother calls her maid named Ina and tells her to show Turan the second best guest room in the house. The next day, Turan opens his eyes on a bed in the grand guest room. After resting, he walks through the hallway where he meets Aziz again. Aziz notes that Turan is up early as usual and asks what he is doing alone in the hallway. Turan points to a magic lantern on the wall and says he finds it interesting, so Aziz says he makes those every now and then for practice and tells Turan he can have one. After hearing this, Turan says he is not that interested. Suddenly, a massive flash of lightning rumbles through the windows, lighting up the hall. Turan looks at it in confusion, while Aziz explains it is Mesa practicing magic and notes she is always diligent. Turan asks if that was Arabian bloodline magic, and Aziz confirms it is the Storm bloodline. He admits he has never hated his own bloodline but says he is a little envious, as she looks like she is becoming a literal god. Turan is curious and wonders about how strong the next Arabian leader is. Aziz asks if he wants to take a look, but Turan says he is curious, yet does not think it is a good idea for a suspicious outsider like him to approach. Aziz asks why that matters since he is not an assassin. He insists he can vouch for him and admits he is curious about who is stronger between Turan and Mesa. Turan says he thinks that is the real reason Aziz brought him there. Aziz laughs and says that, to tell the truth, he has been holding a grudge for a few years and wants to see Mesa frustrated for once. They go to the training grounds where Mesa is standing. Aziz calls out to her. She turns and asks Aziz who is beside him, so Turan introduces himself. Mesa repeats the name, remembering him from last night, and asks what brings them there. Aziz says they saw her practicing magic, so they thought they would join in just like they did in the past. But Mesa reminds Aziz that last time he stormed out crying after she learned something in 2 tries that took him a whole week, which makes Turan laugh. Aziz looks back at him and he quickly apologizes for laughing. Aziz asks Turan if he is mocking him too and then turns to Mesa. He declares Turan has magic talent second to none and suggests they have a duel. Mesa repeats the word duel and looks at Turan with a silent stare. Her eyes glow blue as her mana surges. Turan looks up at the sky, where the weather has turned dark and a lightning storm descends. As she releases more mana, it becomes more terrifying, making her look like a monster. Turan's body stiffens under the sheer weight of her pressure, and his eyes go wide. After it is over, Turan is left panting and sweating from the intensity. After a moment of silence, Mesa looks at him and says she hates to say this, but she does not think Turan is a match for her. Mesa is sorry to say this, but it looks like it will be a bit difficult for him to duel her. Turan stays silent while he stares at her with a focused and determined expression. Aziz steps in with a wide grin and tells her that, in terms of magical power, he certainly would be no match for her. However, he adds that what is truly incredible about this guy is his ability to learn magic. He puts a hand on Turan's shoulder and declares that he is a genius unlike any he has seen in his entire life. Aziz looks at her and asks if even Mesa herself probably does not reach that level of talent. She replies that since Aziz is praising him so much, they should see what he is capable of doing. Turan looks back at her and suggests a new method for their competition. He asks how about they each show a magic that the other probably does not know, and whoever can perform it faster wins. Aziz turns to her and says that it is a good method before asking for her thoughts. She heard Turan does not even know the magic of his own bloodline yet. She explains that it would be unfair if she used her innate magic, so she decides to leave that out of the duel. She tells them she will start first and steps forward on the training ground. Mesa taps the stone floor with her foot and creates a small sprout that bursts through the floor. Turan and Aziz watch as the tiny plant begins to grow rapidly and turn into massive vines that coil around the entire courtyard. Aziz shouts in terror as the vines wrap around him and lift him high into the air. He hangs upside down, while Mesa looks at Turan and identifies the spell as plant creation and manipulation magic, asking if he can do it. Aziz screams and begs to be let go because he is getting dizzy, but she ignores him and tells him to stay like that for a moment because it is fun. Turan reflects on the principles of magic while he looks at the vines. Fire creation magic is merely the manifestation of the phenomenon of burning, and water creation magic is simply the act of extracting invisible moisture from the air. Turan crouches down and places his hand flat against the hard stone floor. He thinks to himself that these vines are the same way, as the magic involves forcing seeds already planted in the ground to sprout rapidly. He realizes that in other words it is not creation, but rather growth. He tells the seed to grow, and a bright blue pulse of mana flows around it. In a split second, several blue vines explode from the floor and weave around Turan. Mesa watches with a shocked expression as the plants follow Turan's will perfectly. Aziz is shocked too. She realizes that given Turan told the plant to grow, he has independently discovered the true nature of this magic. She asks him if he happened to see this magic used somewhere before, to which Turan replies that it is his first time ever seeing it. Mesa HMPH and notes that the things Aziz said today actually turned out to be right for once, which is rare. She releases her magic, and Aziz falls to the ground, groaning in pain. She stands firm and tells Turan that now it is his turn to propose the challenge to her. Turan thinks to himself that using the Zahar's bloodline magic would be suicidal here. Suddenly, he remembers something and he reaches his hand out toward the tall grass. From the grass, a small rat appears and runs toward him. She watches it and asks with doubt if it is just animal control magic and if this is the best he can do. He catches a small rat and holds it tightly in his hand. He tells her it is hardly that and explains that this little guy here is just the ingredient for his magic. He uses his magic, he grips the rat as blue energy begins to pulse around the animal's struggling body. Its life force is drained and its body withers away. The rat turns into a dried husk within Turan's hand. He holds out the dead animal and declares that he is done with his magic. She looks on with a serious face before announcing that now it is her turn. She gestures with her finger and a second rat runs toward her. She grabs it and tries to use the same magic Turan used, but nothing happens to the rat. She closes her eyes and concentrates as she realizes this is not ordinary magic and wonders how he did that anyway. Aziz looks at the scene and asks why Turan would use that kind of disgusting magic. Turan admits that it was just the first thing that came to mind when he was asked. He looks at her and wonders if even a great family like the Arabian house does not know this principle well. Aziz tells her that it seems it is not working and suggests they just give the victory to Turan. Mesa tells him to shut up and asks him if he thinks she cannot do this. When using magic, the causality factor is an extremely complex element. If the phenomenon one intends to cause is something natural, the magic is more efficient. If the user clearly recognizes the cause of the magical phenomenon and the amount of mana is adequate, the spell succeeds. Among these, the capacity to perceive the cause of the phenomenon is an important factor that simultaneously influences the success rate and mana consumption. She just needs a little more time. One of the ways to compensate for the lack of causality is to invest a large amount of mana, filling the inefficiency with volume. Mesa tells the rat to rot while it is still alive. Suddenly, the rat in her hand shrieks as its skin turns to rot. The creature is turned into a mummified husk exactly like the one Tyran created. Aziz notes that it worked. She huffs and says in a tired voice that she really did it. Suddenly, she feels a sharp wave of exhaustion and her vision begins to blur. She collapses to the ground while Aziz screams her name and runs to help her. Tyran and Aziz crouch beside her as they look at her unconscious form. Tyran wonders what the reason could be and if she used too much mana during the spell. He reflects that people don't usually faint just from depleting their mana alone. At most, she should suffer from exhaustion since she lost even the strength needed to support her own body. He looks at her hand and realizes the problem, identifying that she is suffering from a lack of physical nutrients. Tyran lifts her in his arms and asks Aziz if there is no mage with a healing bloodline around here to assist them. Aziz tells him that there isn't anyone like that nearby. Tyran tells Aziz to have them bring water and salt to the ladies' room and bring the adults as well. As he carries her, he realizes that she is so light that he almost confuses her for a lamb rather than a person. Even the mana she used to barely sustain a body that shouldn't even be able to stand has been exhausted. After some time, Mesa opens her eyes and Aziz's mother, her auntie, rushes into Mesa's bedroom and screams her name, asking if she is conscious. Mesa asks why she is here. The woman explains that Aziz told her that she suddenly fainted while training magic with the guest. Mesa remembers what happened. The woman asks her if it is true and wonders if that man happened to do something to her. Mesa declares that no and says it was not his fault at all. She explains that it was just a small mistake on her part and that's all there is to it. Mesa begs everyone to leave because her head is throbbing with pain. The aunt stays for a second to tell her she made some soup and places the bowl on the bedside table. The aunt tells Mesa that she knows she does not eat because of magic, but says she needs to think about her health too. She tells her to try to eat at least a little before she finally leaves the room. Mesa watches her aunt go and then says a soft thank you. She then looks at the bowl and lifts it. She takes a spoonful of the warm soup and eats it. But she is struck by a terrifying memory of her mother and sister getting attacked. She remembers them crying out for her to save them because they believed she could do it. Mesa groans in pain and drops the bowl and it shatters when it hits the floor and she tries to calm herself. Meanwhile, Tyran is sent to lock up in the Berg family basement and finds himself at the temple of the limping goddess. He stares at the giant winged statue in the golden light of the basement. A guard dressed in black draws his sword and tells Tyran that both the doors and the walls are solid without a single crack, and he thinks they are like muscles trained for hundreds of years. He tells him to give up on any thought of trying to break in and leave. This man is Haram Berg. Tyran tells him that he understands and he was not even thinking about doing such a thing. Haram tells him that it is very solid and Tyran says yes, but Haram comes closer and says extremely. Tyran wonders if the guard is currently bragging to him. Haram suddenly performs a swift swing with his longsword and Tyran's eyes follow the movement. He gets curious and asks Haram what he is doing. Haram replies he is training. Haram moves his body in a rhythmic flow, performing a series of strikes and steps. Tyran watches closely and observes that there was no movement wasted. Each movement was the minimum preparation to apply the next force in his strike. Tyran asks himself if this could be the efficiency of a truly trained body. Haram stops his training and looks at Tyran. Tyran quickly apologizes, asking if he interrupted him. Haram says no and asks him what he saw in his movement just now. Haram gets extremely close to Tyran's face and waits for his answer. Tyran declares that he thought it was incredible. The guard steps back and explains that most nobles consider martial arts insignificant because it is easier to attack from afar with magic. It is all because their physical bodies are weak and their minds cannot dominate their bodies and rely on cheap tricks. Tyran says that unless it is a bloodline specialized in physical combat, like the Hercules strength bloodline, focusing on magical power ends up being a more efficient decision for them. However, he adds that when going through trials, situations eventually arise that you must face even if you want to avoid them. After that, Haram holds his sword out to Tyran and tells him to hold it. Tyran asks him if he really wants to give a weapon to a suspicious person like himself, even though he was sent to lock him up here. Haram smiles and says it does not matter. This weapon is just a piece of iron. He explains that what makes it a sword is the body of the one wielding it, and tells him that he cannot cut him with his weak body anyway. Tyran grips the sword in hand and wonders what he could even do with this sword. Haram looks at him. Tyran's entire body erupts with a massive aura of blue flame and mana. The intense power radiates from Tyran as he holds the sword and stares directly at Haram.